Hey guys, Andy back here from Mediocre Hobbies, bringing you another installment in the awesome new Mechanicum Battle Box that Games Workshop very kindly sent me out for review, and so that I can make some awesome videos for you guys to help you get them painted. So obviously the first thing we did was one of the Castellax robots. Really cool piece. I had actually a lot more fun painting it than I was expecting. It's actually so far my favorite thing that I've painted this month, or this month, which is really cool. I was kind of surprised by that, so very pleased with that. So I was very encouraged to dive in and do something else. Now, inside this box set, you do get the awesome new Mechanicum Conveyor tank, which obviously used to exist in resin, big chunky thing, very expensive. But now they've given you a much easier to work with plastic version, and I'm going to be painting it in today's video. This thing can seem quite complicated, as it's not something that's like, a Space Marine tank with just simple flat panels that's very easy to get color on. There's lots of indentation with lots of like mechanical workings and cogs and all sorts of other bits and pieces. And I'm going to show you a couple of tips and tricks to get these bits painted using very little effort, so you can get it on the tabletop and in your games of the Horus Heresy very quick. Okay, before I get into it, I just want to say a huge thank you to all of the support that I've been getting from you guys lately, whether you've just been watching the videos, liking, commenting, whether you've supported in a bigger way over on Patreon or become a channel member. All of those things make a huge difference and do help me continue to make these videos for you guys. So everybody out there who has supported me in any one of those ways, thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you want to check out things like the channel membership or the Patreon, it's linked down in the description below. You get a bunch of extra benefits for being a member of those two things. Okay, without further ado, let's dive in and get this Mechanicum tank painted. Okay, so this is the behemoth in question. As you can see, it is a quite complicated looking piece. I had done a little bit of subassembly, the big shield panoply thing on top. I left that off for easy painting, and then of course the pair of culvers on the front and the Mauler bolt cannon on the top are all extra bits that got left off, including a pair of hunter killer missiles, which I did paint up along the way. There they are on the ground, but then when I got to the end and saw where they were supposed to be glued to, I hated them, so I just left them off. I got the model sprayed black, and then I decided that I'm going to use a little bit of airbrush work here. Now, if you don't have an airbrush, that's totally fine. You can do these next 3 steps, which is just working up the reds with a normal brush. It's just going to take a little bit longer. You can use the stippling technique that I do in all my other kind of heresy style videos, my rhinos. Done it for a bunch of my Cadian tanks, and use these 3 colors that I use. So the Corn Red, Mephiston Red, Evil Sun Scarlet, use that stippling technique, and you will get a beautiful red hull to work from. Like I said, this is a big brute, and I'm trying to make a million videos a week, so I am going to decide to do a little bit of airbrushing to make my life a bit easier. So Corn Red was used to block in anywhere that I thought the armor panels on this thing were supposed to be red. Not worrying too much about overspray, as I can always come back and tidy up the other bits later on. The red bit is the thing we were focusing on as of this moment. Now, the panel bits here are not the complicated parts. It's the bit where you look through those parts and see all the other detail that exists inside of these tanks. And that's the thing where a lot of people will look at this thing and think that's just going to take so much time to paint. It's going to be just no fun whatsoever. And like, this is a transport tank. You might have 2 or 3 of these in your force. There's actually different variants of it with different weapon systems and stuff. So there's even more likelihood you're going to have multiples of these hulled vehicles existing in your army. And you do not want these things to be an absolute chore to paint. That will stop a project dead. You can see how complicated it looks here. I'm going to show you the easiest way under the sun to get these things painted later on. Mephiston Red is then the second color brought in. Like I said, I'm using some control airbrush here to apply this to pretty much the same areas as before, just a little bit less. So we want to leave some of that Corn Red in some of the deeper recesses and some of the kind of lower parts of the tank. We're trying to create this kind of like a graded red, or a gradual red, or should I say, just to break it up a little bit, make a kind of pop. Anything that's just like this, like flat single toned color, it just kills a model so fast. So hopefully I can get a nice bit of variation in the red through the airbrush. I'm not exactly an amazing airbrusher, man. Airbrushian, whatever you call it. I mainly just use it for base coats, but a lot of my Krieg tanks are painted with airbrushes. So I have a little bit of experience with tanks, so let's see if that can pay off and give me a nice result across this thing as I go. And as you can see, as I'm going through the panels on the top, I'm being careful just to hit the center of the panels and leave all the outside bits that kind of slightly darker red. And obviously we want to get in all the nooks and crannies as well that are supposed to be red, but those nooks and crannies, I just hit them with the first coat of red, the corn red. I don't need the brighter colors in the shadowy areas, not important. This panel bit is a great example of how I'm airbrushing. You can see me literally just aiming for the kind of middle sections and leaving the rest nice and dark. And across this video, this actual panel is going to be one of the best indicators of how I want the red to look. So hopefully it will kind of show you guys what I mean. And hopefully you guys will follow through and give this a go yourself, whether it be with the airbrushing or with the stippling technique. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the stippling technique, I will link some of the videos down below and that I use that technique on, where you can get pretty much the same effect, an awesome effect like this, but just using a nice dry brush. Evil Sun Scarlet being the final red, and once again it's exactly the same steps but just less, a little bit further in, a little bit tighter, not wanting to cover the entire thing in this bright vibrant red. And this is going to give us that really nice Mechanicum. And if you watch the video I did on the Thalax robot, you'll see that these are exactly the same 3 colors that I used to get this in, swapping out the corn red base for the contrast red, the corn red that I used for that, or the Flesh Tears red contrast that I used for that. Both those dark rich reds, they just swapped in and out for those, but other than that, layered them in Fiston red and highlighted with Evil Sun Scarlet to give me the tone that I wanted. Now, apart from weathering, this is pretty much all we're going to do to get the coat of red that we need on this tank. We will be doing, like I said, some chipping and weathering and stuff to it later on to make it blend a little bit more with the grim dark of the 41st Millennium, which I think is the correct way that most of the vehicles should be there. Now, that center spine part that we see, it goes to the, the very tip of the front and it runs the entire way down the middle of the top of the tank. In all the other examples I found online of that, it was actually bronze. So that's kind of a personal choice. I quite like the amount of red that I put on the top bit there. If you don't like that, you want to tone down the amount of red and maybe you want to do that in bronze, just do it the same bronze that I'm going to be doing the rest of this tank. Like I said, I'm going to be keeping this scheme as simple as possible, simply because for the Horus Heresy, I'm already working on Imperial Fist and I'm already working on Solar Auxilia. I would love a Mechanicum Force and a Mechanicum Detachment for those armies, but I don't want to spend 1,000,000 hours painting them. I want this to be quick and I want it to look nice on the tabletop, but be simple. So that's what I'm going to do. If you want to go and find something that's, edge highlighting and shading and doing all the different wiring colors and all that kind of madness, then by all means, you can go and find a video like that. I'm going to show you guys how to get it on the tabletop quick and simple. As you can see, we're going in with a little bit of black in my airbrush now, so matte black. I would have used my Air Games Workshop black, but I couldn't find it. So I just grabbed my Army Painter one, and it did a great job. As you can see, I'm being more controlled here, as I don't particularly want to hit all the red work that I've already done with the black. And you may be wondering, the majority of this stuff is silver. Why am I airbrushing it in black? Well, because I don't want it to be... I don't want the silver to scream out. I don't want that to be the focal point. It's the Mechanicum. When you think about Mechanicum, the color that should spring to mind is red. Obviously, unless you're a different hive, you're a riser or whatever you want to do, your orange, that's fine. But standard Martian color scheme for the Mechanicum has red as the primary color. And I feel like when you look across an army, that's the color that should be jumping out at you the most. And that goes for things like these tracks. I've been doing this for years. Like, if you paint the tracks on a tank as a solid silver, which so many people do, I think it looks awful. I don't think it looks natural at all. I don't think it suits the tank. So we're going to be doing a very simple way that I do it. I'm probably going to be adding weathering powders to this tank later on, but I'm not going to do it in this video. I get given out to all the time for adding too much weathering powders at the end of my videos, and people think I've ruined the models, but I prefer them all weathered up. But for you guys, I'm going to leave it blank, and then when I'm finished making the video, then I'm going to go back and slather it in weathering powders. I've got some Balthazar gold here now, and I'm going to go in for all of that brassy trim across this tank. This is by far the most tedious part of painting this thing. And the amount of brass that you apply to this tank can vary. You can add it to more or less depending on your preferences. Like I said, that entire fin down the middle is this color brass. In all of the examples, I'm going to keep that red. The cog symbol here, of course, on the back piece is going to go brass as well. And then all the other trim parts on this. We'll also be we're going to be doing a little bit of silver work and then going back and adding just a touch more brass later on. But I'm not going to show you that stages just know that after we do this silver step, I did go back with some Balthazar gold and just do some like trim work on like bolters and kind of couplings and stuff like that you're going to find inside that kind of recessed areas of the tank. Now, because our tank is in that kind of really clean stage, this is when we throw transfers onto the tank, because after we do the weathering and scratching, you can't put, transfers down on top of that. You're going to want to be doing them beforehand and then getting them scratched and weathered with the rest of the tank. This was an interesting one. I obviously had to apply a transfer across the door, and it has a huge break straight through the middle. So I waited for the transfer to be really set and stuck. Then I went in with a scalpel blade and basically cut in around with the door. And then I used some black to clean it up and make it look like a really nice clean break in the door. Okay, now it's time for the magic step. Like I said, after we did the interior of the kind of mechanical working-y bits, black, all we're going to do is hit the entire tank now with a dry brush of lead belcher. And you can see what effect going over the black interior bits with lead belcher does. It gives you a stunning look. Like, it really does look like beaten machinery. Like, it's so nice. Like I said, we're going to go back in and add just a little bit of extra detail with some more brass and some Black Legion contrast for some of the piping. But other than that, look at the effect you get. It's not a solid block silver. Like I said at the start, flat colors just do not look good. They will ruin the look of a model. Simple techniques like this, simply dry brushing. And because we're going over the entire tank with this, adding a little bit of chipping, a little bit of weathering across the edges, this dry brush is catching all the rivets, adding a little bit of silver to them. Because I blacked out the tracks with the airbrush as well, I can just go in and dry brush them over with silver. It's going to give them a really nice, distinctive, different look to the rest of the tank, but it's not going to steal your attention. This is super important for kind of giving that visualization to the right parts. And as I go over this tank and hit all those red bits, it's going to hit all those brassy copper bits and actually act like a highlight for them as well. So I'm not going to touch any of those brassy bits again with anything else. It's a flat Balthazar gold base coat, dry brush over with some lead belcher, bam. Because your attention is drawn to the transfers and the red, you're not going to notice if there's not too much detail in other areas. Like all the extra bits of detail that exist outside the tank, the bits that I did as kind of sub-assembly except for that top part, all I'm doing after they were sprayed black is dry brushing them all silver like this, and then I'm going to go back in with some Balthazar gold and like do the casings of the weapons and stuff. So for instance, for this Mauler bolt cannon, I was going to do it in gray or something like that, but after further reflection and looking at some reference images, the Mechanicum weapons are silver and brass, so I just went in and painted the casings of this weapon in brass. And then of course the searchlight, the hunter killer missiles, the void shield generators on top as well. Same treatment, dry brush of silver, pick out some of the details in brass, and then throw Nuln Oil on top of it. Simple as, count those parts as done. Here I am going back in with that brass, like I said afterwards, and just adding a very small amount of detail to some choice parts. You can choose what parts you want. I like the coupling bits looking like it. Just little bits that stand out. Some flat bits that could probably be buttons or lights or whatever. I hit them with a bit of brass as well because, well, why not? Less is more, but it's going to make the interior of that look like you put a lot of time and effort into it when you can clearly see that we did not. Even this bit here, I'm just doing the top parts of it in brass. Back and forth, simple as. Brass and red looks so good together. Gold and red looks good together as a thing. So yeah, this really does work. One of the things I'm really not up on either is what transfers you're supposed to use for Mechanicum. I don't know how to break up, which hive is this symbol or whatnot. I probably should have done a bit more research. I just randomly chose some transfers and decided to stick them on. So hopefully I didn't go too far off the map. Now, all of the weapons and equipment on board the Mechanicum tank are slave driven by some servo skulls or servitors and stuff like that. So there is a little bit of a human component with the bones sticking out of all the different weapons. All I did was I got some of the Hobgrot hide color and base coated those, or Morghast bone. And then I got some Ushabti bone and just re-highlighted those bits. After that, when we went to the Nuln Oil stage on the metallics and the brass, I just went Nuln Oil over the top of those as well. Added a really nice bit of shadow to them. Bomb, done. This is the bit where I took a risk, because why not? I extra dry brushed the front of this tank to catch all of the coils that are running down the kind of big shock prow that this thing has. Now, I did do a bit of research into what this thing is, and the way it's described as it is just an energized prow. This thing can literally tank shock vehicles and cut them in half, destroy them. And they talked about it having a very similar technology to the disruptor fields in power fists and power weapons. And then these coils just sprang out to me. They look like energy coils like you would have on a plasma gun or something like that. And I couldn't find a single reference to them anywhere else being a color. They just had them as a flat, basic color, and I thought this is a great excuse to add another spot of color into this vehicle. So I decided to do the big shock prow in Talazar blue, the energy coils and the void shields, Talazar blue, the plasma culvers, we got some Talazar blue, and that became my kind of secondary color to this, the kind of thing that pops a little bit. The servo skills like servo lens eyes, all done in blue, the searchlight lens done in blue. Simple as. You see those like lines in the armor on the sides there that look like vents? Those are the bits that I will be going in and hitting with some weathering powder later on. Like I'll get some black weathering powder and I'll like kind of go over those areas with it to make it look like that is kind of belching smoke and other material. Not something I'm going to do in the video. Like I said, people tend to give out to me for going overboard with the powders, but I quite like it. Going overboard with powder, that made it sound wrong. The weathering powder. And you'll see a quick example of how quick the Talazar blue adds just an extra spot of awesomeness to the two different ones there. I also know that these guns aren't really supposed to have glowing coils, but I just want them to stand out a little bit and look a little bit cool. I know they're not plasma guns. But yeah, I went for it anyway. Even the bottom bit, which is I think supposed to be just like handholds for the handhold version of this, I decided to do it in blue as well. And I think it works. The Mauler bolt cannon we have here, which like I said is just dry brushed silver, and then we did the casings in brass now. And this is where we're going to jump in with that null and oil stage. Just to add a little bit more variety, a little bit more depth to these pieces that can look a little bit flat. And as you can see, those servo skulls with all the bone that we did are going to get covered in null and oil here as well. And like I said, you can watch a million different videos from a million different people on how to paint up this thing. And for me, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of people out there, I feel, making it way more complicated than it needs to be. I want someone to look at a video, a tutorial that I do, and feel like they can easily follow these steps and get a very similar result. And they can like go away from this feeling confident to start putting this piece together and getting it painted up for the tabletop. And at the end of it all, they're going to have a really nice thing they're going to be super proud of. And it's going to be done. It's not going to just sit under your bed in a box forgotten about because you were too scared to get it started, or you started the painting process and you weren't liking where it was going. Every model looks awful for the first like 80% of its painting. It's only in the last 20% where it really comes together. We call this the ugly stage. And unfortunately, so many hobbyists give up during the ugly stage of miniature painting. All you need to do is persevere a little bit more, and I promise you, you will really like the results. I mean, look what that silver dry brush did to that tank. Look how all the details on it just kind of pop. I really like how the plasma kind of hull charger thing worked out. I love it. Can any of you guys think of any of the stages I did in this that are super complicated? I don't think so. Here I am super gluing in the remaining parts. When you're assembling sub-assembled stuff, super glue is my go-to. Plastic glue usually won't work because there's a layer of paint between the two plastic components, and the plastic glue doesn't melt through the paint. So unfortunately not a good idea. So that's where I just a little touch of super glue. I'm also not a big fan of moving parts. I know some people love moving parts. I don't. So all these moving guns here, I just glue them into place and have it as a solid, done model piece at the end, ready to rock and roll. I left the Mauler bolt cannon to rotate a little bit because I'm still a child at heart, but other than that, and you see the very top bit between the energy or the void shield generators, that's where you're supposed to put 200 killer missiles. Not a big fan of that, so I left them off. But this is my finished tank for my Mechanicum for the Battle Group box. Like I said, super pleased with the result. I do hope we get all the other alternative builds. There's ones where the entire top of it opens up to have racks of missiles and stuff, or other huge cannons hanging off it, which kick out quite a lot of firepower. So I'm quite excited by the concept of using those and getting them painted up for this force. A couple of still images to give you guys an example of what it might actually look like on a tabletop. I know I say it's the end of every video, but it's just because I got another quite complicated thing painted. Quite proud of this result. Love to know what your thoughts are in the comments below. Will you be getting this box set, and will you be following this guide to get it done? And here we have our finished Triaros Conveyor, a finished Mechanicum transport tank. It has 20 dudes safely across the battlefield to fight the enemies of the Imperium or the Omnissiah. It's such a beastly tank. It's really cool. It's very, very big. As you can see it next to the robot that I did previously, it absolutely dwarfs it in size. But yeah, I'm glad to have that done. I am definitely not finished with this box set. I'm going to do some of the infantry in it as well because they're really cool. And I think I can get a scheme out for painting them really quickly. And hopefully I'll get that out to you guys in kind of a short while. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. You got a few tips and tricks on how to tackle these complicated tanks. And hopefully these techniques will transfer to all the other tanks as well. Thank you guys so much for sticking around to the end of the video. If you enjoy it, do that normal thing that you should do for any and all creators that you enjoy when you watch their videos, which is like the video, costs you nothing. If you have anything to ask or say, make sure you put in the comments below. That does push engagement and help the video to go to more people. And if you really enjoy what they do and want to make sure you see more of their content, make sure you subscribe. It costs you zero to do. It makes a huge difference to us. All right, guys, thank you so much for sticking around. I'll see you in the next one.